Shalom, shalom. We're going to jump right into it. And I hope that this edifies you. I hope you get a lot of understanding out of this. And I hope you get a lot of information that you can use in your spiritual growth. All right, shalom, Ayla, Chadash, Rib. All right, now, check this out. There are a lot of people that hate and they reject Christ, who they call JC. They reject JC. Some people call him JC. Some people call him Christ. Some people call him Jesus. Some people call him Yeshua. Some people call him Yehoshua. Some people call him a myth. Whatever your reasons are, let me break down to you, why people reject him. One, people don't understand. Well, you know what? Let me, in no certain order. Okay. Number one, people have never examined the Greek and the Hebrew prophecies in the Greek and Hebrew Bible that give you the description and the characteristics, as well as, like I said, prophecies about JC, all right, about Christ. They never examined it in detail for themselves. That's why the Bible is such a dangerous book, as you can recall from the book of Eli. Denzel Washington wanted the transmission of it, but the Edomite in the movie wanted it to as a control tool to oppress people. Okay, so people don't understand the descriptions, the characteristics, and the prophecies regarding any messianic figure in detail that are found in the Greek and in the Hebrew scriptures. Most people don't really read the Greek scriptures. Okay. The other reason is because they hate white supremacy. People reject and hate Christ, JC, because they hate white supremacy. But they don't realize that Christ himself is also a victim of white supremacy, is and was a victim of white supremacy. Which leads me to my other point. People don't realize that Christ is a victim of spiritual crucifixion that took place by Europeans, for the most part, in the Americas, okay, where he was morphed into like a Frankenstein image of the biblical Christ, but all sorts of paganistic characteristics were put into a belief system, religious belief system about Christ, and people have never really examined or looked with their own eyes about Christ. So they don't know anything about Christ or JC for themselves. They don't know nothing for themselves. They're only going by what people have said about him. They haven't really examined the matter for themselves thoroughly. But they don't understand that the crucifixion of Christ happened in the Americas also. All right. So my third point is that people also reject Christ because they're following people whose hatred of the Messiah, whose hatred of Christ is fueled by the three things that I just talked about, fueled by not understanding the spiritual crucifixion that took place against Christ in the Americas by Europeans, not understanding and not ever examining the Greek and the Hebrew prophecies, characteristics, and descriptions about the Messiah, as well as not understanding that Christ himself is a victim of white supremacy in the Americas, where he was whitewashed and changed into a soft pacifist sort of white man with blonde hair and blue eyes, which is totally inaccurate. Okay, but this is the image that they've been fed about Christ. Now I'm gonna get to my 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 main point, but before I get to my fourth point, which is going to take the longest to expand upon, I want to give you a bonus, which I thought of right before I went live. The bonus is this: people hate Christ, and they reject Christ because of like a culmination of all these four reasons. Why? Because the Bible fails, fails, in their religious dogma due to their misunderstanding about the Bible. They feel as if the Bible has failed, or the Bible has fallen short of addressing the Native Americans, the Latinos, and the Black people in the Americas directly. Okay? So, in their estimation, the Bible has failed to address their needs and their social injustices that they've been a victim of which they've been a victim for the past 500 years. And traditional Christianity simply does not address that. So they say, well, you know what? I'm going to be a Rastafarian, which is new. I'm going to be a Catholic, which is new and, related to the root of the Bible. Or they say, I'm going to be a Catholic, a Rastafarian, or a Muslim, which is new compared to what the history of the Bible, these things are new. So they feel as if what's happening in their life and the life of their people and their ancestors isn't addressed in the Bible. But do they know that Islam was also a horrific experience for our people? Little do they know that that Hinduism was a horrific experience for our people. Yeah, the people that are talking about lining up chakras, and they don't understand that Hinduism also enslaved our people in India, from Gujarat all the way down to Chennai. I've seen the oppression with my own eyes in India of our people, as well as in Sri Lanka. So these are, the three reasons that our people reject JC and reject the Bible, the New Testament, so-called. And the bonus reason is that they feel as if the Bible doesn't address their social and political oppression, needs, or reality from a historical perspective, and they would be correct superficially. But when you understand the Bible, it speaks directly to the history, the present, and the future of the so-called Blacks, Native Americans, and Latinos in North, Central, South America, and the Caribbean. Why do I say that? Well, all you have to do is read Deuteronomy chapter 28 and understand the prophecies that we see in the Bible and apply them to the history of the peoples around the earth and see who consistently fulfills all of those prophecies. And then also is to look at Genesis chapter 49 and Deuteronomy chapter 33, which goes into the other prophecies about the Israelites also. And that we indeed fulfill not only the prophetic experiences, but we fulfill the characteristics of Israel. So now you have Israelites that embrace the Bible and say, well, I'm going to embrace this part of the Bible, but I'm not going to embrace this part of the Bible, which leads me to my fifth and probably the most poignant point, okay, which is this. People do not know or realize and are not taught that the first strong opposition against a man in the first century being recognized, respected, honored, and revered as the fulfillment of the biblical prophecies regarding Christ, the awaited for Mashiach. People do not understand the fact that it was not until 900 years after his death that there was any scriptural rebuttal against the acceptance of the first century black man known as Jesus Christ as the Messiah. They think that most people haven't even thought about this point. Do you realize that there was almost 1,000 years of silence from Judaism regarding the messiahship of who was received as the Messiah until Rashi presented an argument, who was a biblical scholar in the 1000s. He didn't present any opposition until like the 11th century, and that was regarding Isaiah 53 in his commentary about Isaiah 53. So what people don't understand is that there was roughly 900 years of silence from Judaism regarding any rebuttal about what people had been claiming from the Greek and Hebrew Bible since the first century. And I think that that's really something that you need to sit back and absorb. He said like this. He said like this. People believed in him in the first century. And in the first and second century, people accused Judaism of tampering with the scriptures and changing timelines. In the first century, people said that this man is the Messiah that we've been waiting for. We've been waiting for this man. He's the Messiah. We've been waiting for him for over 1,000 years, and he is the Messiah. This is what people were saying in the first century. The first century, meaning the years from 0 to the year 100, that's the first century. So now, it's not until the middle or late 1000s, like I said, roughly 900 years later, that people started to say, well, he's not the Messiah because Isaiah 53 is not talking about him. It's talking about the whole nation. That was their strongest rebuttal. Not anything in the New Testament, not any prophecy that people believed about him, not any historical timeline that he was expected to fulfill. But the fact that Isaiah 53 was talking about a nation as opposed to people. And that was a far-fetched idea even at that time. And I'm going to go into a little bit of history about it. Let's break it down like this. 900 years after the Messiah delivered the book of Revelation to the disciple John on an island of Patmos, 900 years after that is when the first rebuttal against Christ being a Messiah was documented. And not only that, how do you attack a prophet? You attack a prophet or a person's claim at being a prophet by attacking the prophecies and the books that they left behind. But they were scared of the book of Luke because the criticisms about him were written after the destruction of the temple. So he said that the temple was going to be destroyed and that the Israelites were going to be scattered into all nations in slavery. And we know in retrospect, like I said earlier, that is a clear fulfillment of what we read in Deuteronomy chapter 28. We know that in retrospect. So they knew in retrospect, oh, he said this. They knew in retrospect that Daniel wrote about, used the number 7 regarding kingdoms and rulers. And in Revelation, it talks about the 7 kingdoms, the new Babylon. And they talked about the 7 combining into one head. Didn't they attack those prophecies? Why didn't they attack the book of Revelation? First, second century Judaism, they had the whole Bible available to them. Why didn't they go through and verse for verse and line for line attack what was written about Hamashiach? Why did it take 900 years to only attack one chapter in the whole Bible? Now, I'm about to walk you through a brief timeline. You have most of our people spoke Aramaic in the first and second century. They spoke Aramaic. All right. Or Aramia, right? spoke Aramaic or Arami. So they would translate the Bible into Aramaic as it was read in the synagogues on the Sabbath day. So at a point they said, you know what, let's just write the verses of the Bible in Aramaic beside the Hebrew so people can read it and get a better understanding. Just like it was almost like a bilingual Bible for Hebrew and for the Aramaic. So the two most popular, listen to what I'm about to say to you, the two most popular versions of this Bible, this type of Torah, this type of Tanakh, they call it a Targum. It's called a Targum, Targum. The two most popular Targums was one by a guy named Onkelos, who is also Aquila, who is also Aquila in history, was a Gentile convert. He wrote the one called Targum Onkelos in about 150 AD. This is the 2nd century now. This is about 150 years after BC started, after AD started. This is 150 years now. And roughly about maybe 50 years after the publishing of the book of Revelation. So they put a Targum together, Onkelos Targum. Then you have an Israelite named Jonathan ben Uziel, who put a Targum together in approximately 150 AD. Neither one of those most famous worldwide Targums, these are the two most famous Targums in the whole world. Nobody can attest that. Nobody can challenge that. It's an attested fact. So when they put their Targums together, nobody said that Isaiah 53 was talking about a nation. Both of them said, oh, this is definitely talking about the Messiah. Everybody said that. And nobody put together any rebuttal of Hebrews believing in the Messiah. No rebuttal. So now we're in the year 150. There's no rebuttal. There's no rebuttal. So now let's look at Jewish. Now, mind you, listen very carefully. I'm only in the 2nd century AD now. I'm not even in the 1400s, the 900s. I'm talking about literature that was already put together by the 1st century AD. Nobody has any rebuttals during that same time frame of when people are saying this man is the Messiah. Nobody's saying no, he's not because he didn't fulfill this prophecy, that prophecy. No, nobody's saying anything to contradict the belief that he's the Messiah. Now, you have something else that's put together, which was a heavy influence on what we call the Talmud, which has some very bad stuff in it and has some very good stuff in it. So it's not a Bible. It's a book of opinions and commentaries and beliefs of people at that time frame, and it covers a broad spectrum of viewpoints. So it's neither good nor bad, generally speaking, but it's a book that has good, true stuff in it, and it has bad, untrue stuff that's in it. So it's not a pure document. It's nothing from the mouth of God Almighty. It's not a commentary of what God Almighty said was going to happen. It's a book that has opinions in it. Now check this out. One of the main foundational documents of that book is called the Midrash Rabbah. Now the Midrash Rabbah was before the Talmud, but we're looking at the 200s to 400s. In that Midrash Rabbah, we have no criticism against the fact that JC, as they want to say, or Hamashiach, the Messiah from the 1st century, is indeed the Messiah. Let me so-called rabbi. You had Eleazar, Yehoshua, and then you have Yohanan ben Zakkai, and then you have a so-called rabbi that was called Akiva. Prominent scholars. Now, Akiva said, hey, Isaiah 53 is talking about a man. Okay? Eleazar and Yehoshua, these so-called rabbi leaders, said it's definitely talking about a man. Why am I talking about these two guys? Because these two men were alive in the same time period as the book of Revelation was finished, which means that they were alive during the time frame that disciples of the Messiah or students of those disciples were alive. One was born like 30 and one was born like 50. I think, if I'm not mistaken, the time, their lifespan kind of escapes me a little bit. It was like 85, so 30. So both of them were around during the time of the temple, before the temple was destroyed, when people were starting to believe in mass in the Messiah. And they claimed to have the writings of these leaders from that time frame and a historical record about them. Both of these guys from Jerusalem during the time of the Second Temple had a mumbling word to say against our acceptance of the Messiah while they were still living, breathing, walking on the earth, going in and out of the temple before it was destroyed. Nobody wrote anything to say that this is why he's not the Messiah. And why are these two instrumental? They're instrumental because Yohanan ben Zakkai went on to found a very influential school of the Bible, of the Torah, of the Tanakh in Yavne. And then Akiva went on to support. He died in 135 BC. He went on to support 135, 136, but he went on to support the Bar Kokhba rebellion in 135 AD. And again, he did not say anything against the Messiah of the first century and why he wasn't the Messiah. He simply embraced another person saying that this person was the Messiah. And that person got killed. And Akiva got killed. But Ben Zakkai, he lived. He didn't die. And he didn't take a stance on whether Bar Kokhba of the 135 BC, AD rebellion was Christ or not, was the Messiah or not. He didn't take a stance on that. But what we do have is Ben Zakkai leading a charge to say, let's canonize, let's say that these are the only books we're going to believe in. So he kind of put together that process to say, hey, these are the books that we Israelites believed in. Why didn't he do it during the time of the Second Temple? Before it was destroyed. Why did he do it after it was destroyed? Because so many people were embracing the whole Bible and believing in the whole Bible and embracing the fact that this man is the Messiah, that they had to cut books out of the Hebrew belief system. They actually took out books. They actually said, we're not going to believe in Ecclesiasticus. We're not going to believe in the book of First Maccabees, Second Maccabees. We're not going to believe in the book of Sirach anymore as canon scriptures. But guess what? When you go into Sepharia, you see that many Jewish people today do accept and believe the historicity, the historical depictions in those books. Why do you think they celebrate Hanukkah? If they don't believe what's in the book of Maccabees, why are they celebrating Hanukkah? That shows that they believe what's in those books. You see? So my point was this. My point was that Yohanan ben Zakkai, he came later on and said, you know what, we're only going to believe in these books. Under what authority? When the Israelites of the first century BC, they believed in everything, including the Apocrypha, from Genesis all the way to Maccabees. Now, we can say third or fourth Maccabees, because the fourth Maccabees goes into the first century BC. So it may not have been thoroughly completed by the time the first and second Maccabees was completed in the let's say like the 190s to 170s, because remember the events, no, like not 190s, but like the 135, 150, because the events in there happened in 165 BC. A lot of those events happened in 165 BC. So some things happened after that. So the account was not yet solidified in the Hebrew or the Greek, but it was solidified by the time the first century came around, because when we look in the book of John, chapter 10, verse 22, we see that Hamashiach was celebrating the Feast of Dedication. So we know that the Israelites, at best, believed in first and second Maccabees, beyond a shadow of a doubt, because that's the only historical records we have of the events that are celebrated during the Feast of Dedication called Hanukkah. So who gave Ben Zakkai the authority to say, you know what, we don't believe in those books no more? Not only that, but you know when you say Psalms chapter 2 and Isaiah chapter 53, guess what? That division that we have of the Bible was developed by a person that would be considered to be a Christian. Stephen Langton, like Langston Hughes, but Langton with no S, all right? Actually, without two S's, Langston, without that S, Langton. In 1205, he put the Bible together and said, these are going to be chapters, chapters, chapters. Then later on, another person that would be considered to be a Christian came in 1571 and said, we're going to put these verses in the Bible. So the whole system of chapter and verse was not even put into the Jewish Bible by Judaic or Judaism practitioners. It was put by people that believed that Christ was the Messiah. Matter of fact, the Bible we have now that we call the Jewish Bible, the Tanakh, was not even put together by a so-called Jew. It was edited by Jacob ben Chaim, but it was actually put together by a man named Bomberg. And then by the time they printed it, they put it out and edited it, Chaim started to believe in the whole Bible, not just in the so-called Old Testament. So what's my point? My point is that the records that Judaism uses today, the foundation of it was put together by people that were not considered to be Jews. And the criticism against in other words, the attacks against the Bible believing people that accepted the Genesis to Revelation was silent for 900 years. Can you imagine 900 years of silence? And people now, they just look at the books and, well, that's not true. This is bad, or you shouldn't believe because of X, Y, Z. But the people at that time were silent. Not to mention the fact that, well, even when we look at the commandment keeper history, which under Wentworth A. Matthew, why did Wentworth A. Matthew originally call the congregation Ethiopian Hebrew commandment keepers, church of the living God, the pillar and ground of the truth and faith of Jesus Christ? Not JC. I'm talking about the commandment keepers from Harlem. Why did they put Jesus Christ, commandment keepers, and Ethiopian Hebrews in their title when the church was originally registered? If they didn't, and people say, well, he did, and he was also called, Wentworth A. Matthew was also called Bishop Wentworth A. Matthew. That's what he was called. And people say, well, that was just a gimmick. That was just trying to get believers to come in it. Remember, this is 1920s. So he was using a false title of something he didn't believe in to try to draw people that did believe in Christ into the congregation and then try to tell them not to believe in Christ. Can you imagine the confusion with that? No, he believed in Christ, Hamashiach, and he believed in the commandments that Hamashiach followed. And he called himself a bishop, as we see in the book of Titus and other books in the Bible, what a bishop is. So even the early Israelites in Harlem, in New York City in the 1920s, they put Jesus Christ in the name of their fellowship, and then it changed later on, and they got a different name. But this is what is recorded. So now, during the same time period, you had another guy whose name was Yosef ben Halafta, Halafta, Yosef ben Halafta. Now, what Yosef ben Halafta did, he wrote a book. The book was called Sefer Olam Rabbah, which means book eternal, or book eternal great. So the great book of eternity. And what that book did was it laid out a timeline from creation up until the time of 135 AD, the Bar Kokhba rebellion. So it was completed, after the Bar Kokhba rebellion took place, but it wasn't necessarily started, during that 135 BC AD. It was started before that, but it was finished after the Bar Kokhba rebellion happened in 135 BC, or 135 AD rather. So now, what exactly, what happened? What happened was that book changed the chronology in Genesis chapter 5 and Genesis chapter 11, where it talks about this one, had this one, became the father of this person, and he lived these many years after he gave birth to the baby, and he was this age when the baby was born. It changed that whole timeline right there. All right. It changed the whole timeline. Okay. And when it changed the timeline, it changed the expectation of when the Messiah was supposed to come. Okay. It changed the expectation of when the Messiah was supposed to come. And that laid the foundation for other people to change the times in the new Hebrew Old Testament. But a lot of these things were started by Aquila, also known as Onkelos, that wrote that Targum, because he started to put the Bible into Greek. Why would you put it into Greek around the 1st, 2nd century AD, when it's been in Greek since 286 BC? It's been in Greek for over 300 years. Why did this guy need to come back and put it into Greek? Not Hebrew, but put it into Greek. And that's another mystery that we're not going to dive into right now. So in summary, people hate the Messiah, and they reject the Messiah for, let's say, 5 main reasons. They're following people. Well, first, let's say they don't understand the spiritual crucifixion, that the new Frankenstein Christ that they were taught by white people in the Americas. Okay? And Christ was crucified again in the Americas. Number 2, they've never examined the prophecies, characteristics, and the description about Christ in the Greek or the Hebrew in any detail. Most people are armchair scholars or scrollaholics that'll see a video saying something and say, you know what, that appeals to my emotions and supports what I feel and think, so I'm going to believe this. And the third thing is that they hate white supremacy, not understanding that the image that they have about Christ is a product of white supremacy, and that Christ himself is a victim of white supremacy. And as the bonus, they don't understand that they don't understand why the Bible does not address us directly. And they don't see the Bible as addressing us directly because they've never studied the Bible in detail, and they've never studied beyond what Europeans gave them about the Bible. So they look at Islam, or they look at other religions, Rastafarianism, or they look at African religion and say, you know what, this is what I'm gonna follow because it addresses me as a people, but in actuality, it doesn't. The African religions and even voodoo address Hamites. Islam addresses Arabs, and Hinduism and chakras and all of that type of stuff addresses people from India, Hindus. All right. But the Bible literally addresses so-called Black, Latino, and Native American people, primarily in North, Central, South America, and the Caribbean, but also found in Africa, in Asia, in Australia, and on all of the continents, including Antarctica, which is an extension of the tribe of Naphtali, and then some of Asher in Argentina, with year-round bases in Argentina in the south, and also the Israelites that went from Argentina into Easter Island, 3,000 miles off the coast, which is called Easter Island because that's when they found it, but the natives there call it Rapa Nui. So a lot of those people over there are the tribe of Naphtali also. Not to mention the fact that they found the same chickens that are from Argentina, the native jungle fowl from Argentina. They found skeletons of those same chickens over on the island of Rapa Nui, which is called Easter Island, which demonstrates a trade and migration of the people of those two places, because they know chicken can fly. No chicken can fly no 3,000 miles. I don't care how big of a jumbo wing he is, ready for Wingstop or BW3 super duper wing span special, right? Super jumbo wing special. But no. So they don't understand the fact that the Bible does address our people directly in the Old and New Testaments, so-called Old and New Testaments, because that term wasn't even used until the 2nd century AD. There was no such thing as no Old and New Testament. That's a term that so-called Christians created to say, hey, this is the distinction, but it's not a term used to describe the two sections of the Bible. And the fourth thing, not counting the bonus, and the fifth thing, if you count the bonus of people being disgruntled because they don't think the Bible addresses them when it actually does, the fifth thing would be that the people don't know that the first strong scriptural rebuttal against believers in the Messiah didn't come until 900 years later. And it didn't even address the Israelites in general. I mean, it didn't even address the Messiah in general or general prophecies about him throughout the Bible, but it only addressed Isaiah chapter 53 for the most part. 900 years after the book of Revelation was given by the Messiah to John on the Isle of Patmos, which they didn't offer any rebuttal against. Now, and I'll say this in closing, during the time frame that the early believers, now let me get something straight. When I say early believers, these people were not purists, which means that they didn't accept the whole aspect of the Bible from Genesis to Revelation in its totality. A lot of early Christians rejected the Torah, so we have to be clear about that. Everybody didn't, but some people did. So with that in mind, let me say this. The 1st century believers in the Messiah and the 2nd century believers in the Messiah, they laid railing, thorough accusations against Judaism of their time, saying that they went into the Bible and had actually started to change the Bible and had actually started to give things against the Bible to rebuttal the Messiah. This is historically, and most people haven't studied that, so they don't even know that. And most people don't even know that Judaism that rejected the Messiah of the 1st century, Yeshua HaMashiach or Yehoshua HaMashiach, they don't know that they rejected him. The people that rejected him did not give any logical, scriptural, or biblical reasons of why they reject him until 900 years later. That's how powerful the early believers who were Hebrews, that's how powerful they believed that he was the Messiah. because the scriptural evidence was convincing. And that's when Judaism said you create a whole new Bible. That started to redact the verses in the Hebrew Bible and then issue a whole new Hebrew Bible. That's why prior to the Aleppo Codex and the Leningrad Codex being introduced in the 900s and the 1000s, we don't have any records, any ancestry documents of that Bible. We have no record of any Hebrew Bibles being intact before the 900s. But if you look at the Hebrew text, we got Hebrew text and Greek text, fragments of both. But we have whole volumes of the Greek from the 3rd century BC when it was translated, the Torah, in 285 BC under Ptolemy Philadelphus at Alexandria, Egypt, in northern Egypt. And we have the Geniza, which is a repository for Holy Scriptures that was found in Egypt that are also written in Greek that confirm the Septuagint that we have now. And we have, it's only when you get into the Dead Sea Scrolls that you find a lot of the Hebrew and you find a lot of the Greek records that don't coincide with each other. And believe it or not, and I hate to say this, but I don't, so sorry, but not sorry, the people at the Dead Sea Scrolls, Qumran, a lot of them were Fruit Loops anyway. A lot of them guys were loony bins anyway. Just look up Mandan. Who were the people at the Dead Sea Scroll? They had a crazy, wacky belief system, and they believed they could do sacrifices as Levitical system outside Jerusalem in the cave desert community. So that's how wacky they were. So I'm looking at the Dead Sea Scrolls just from a historical viewpoint, not from a doctrinal endorsement viewpoint. So when you look at the Dead Sea Scrolls, they got all types of things written inside there. Things that they believed and things how they did stuff, the sons of light and sons of darkness, and they had all sorts of books that they at the Dead Sea Scrolls. So the Dead Sea Scrolls is not an authoritative compilation of scripture by an authoritative source, but the Greek scriptures, the old Greek scriptures that were completed in the 1st century AD, no later than the 1st century AD, was authoritative and recognized pre-Second Temple fall. And the New Testament was completed before the end of the 1st century AD. So there's like less than a 200-year gap between the whole Bible being presented and completed. And that's what people need to understand. And after the whole Bible was completed in the late 1st, early 2nd century AD, Judaism was silent for 900 years against any criticism. Yeah, everybody got a lot of stuff to talk now against the so-called New Testament, but nobody opened up, nobody was opening their mouth against the whole Bible in that time frame. Why? Because all the records were together. Nothing had been changed. Nothing was altered. Nothing had been doctored. You can't find any records from the 1st or 2nd century of people criticizing the 1st or 2nd century believers in the Messiah. None. I challenge you. I challenge you. So when it comes to that, you people that reject JC, I want all the smoke. I want all of the smoke from the 1st or 2nd century of any of these famous so-called rabbis, any of the famous so-called scholars. I want smoke from Ben Zakkai. I want smoke from Akiva. I want smoke from the Ben Uziel Targum. I want smoke from the Onkelos Targum. I want all the smoke. Don't come bringing me something that somebody wrote in the 900s. Don't come bringing me something that somebody wrote in the 1400s. Bring me something from that time period, what we would call with the same time that we're talking about, contemporaneous. contemporaneous. Give something contemporaneous, because we got the contemporaneous records. I'm just talking out my mouth now. We're not even showing improvement from that. So before you come at me, you better come correct. Before you come at me, you better come correct, and you better do your research from the 1st and 2nd century documents of historically recognized documents and of the historical Greek and Hebrew text that was compiled before the end of the 2nd century BC. I'm sorry, the 2nd century AD. And if you want to put some cherries on top and say, well, you know what? The Vaticanus was completed in the 3rd or the 4th century. Guess what? I'll give you leeway. I'll give you up to that time frame. Show me somebody from that time period. Show me somebody from the time frame of the Vaticanus that disputed anything that the whole book said in any part of it regarding the Messiah or regarding the account that's in there. Now, you'll find people criticizing and saying, well, he ain't the Messiah. His doctrine was this and his doctrine was that, but ain't nobody ever going to the scripture and give you no quote unquote, dare I say it, breakdown about why he wasn't the Messiah. And I dare you do it in the English. I mean, I dare you do it, look in the Greek, because the Greek text is older. And let me break down to you real quick, and this is going to be my closing. And if anybody got any questions, right, I'm going to go off camera, and then I'm going to continue on Clubhouse. Somebody can go on to the broadcast on Facebook or on YouTube and put the link to the Clubhouse so we can continue, off camera. Can somebody do that for me, please? Put the Clubhouse link on my broadcast, on my page on Facebook real quick. So now, if we look at that time frame with the Vaticanus, where is any rebuttal? There is none. So you don't find people talking yin-yang until well after. Again, check this out. The first major rebuttal is by Rashi in the 1000s. What do you have happening in the 1000s, which would be called the 11th century AD? What do you have happening at that time frame? Why would Rashi get so bold now? I'm gonna tell you why he got so bold now. Because that's when you have the completion of the Aleppo Codex. The finalized, redacted Jewish Bible was presented in Hebrew in the 900s. That's when our people that reject the Messiah, because don't get it twisted, these were our people at the root of this conspiracy, recruiting other brothers and recruiting Gentiles to help in this diabolical plot. But that's when they got their story together and said, this is the real Hebrew Bible. Here we presented it. We got the nice dots and we got the dashes. We got the nikudot. We got the vowel points. We got the cantillation marks. And we got everything right here. See, ain't it pretty? So basically, it's almost like like not for nothing. It's almost like voila. You got a full-grown Hebrew Bible appearing de la nada. A full-grown Hebrew Bible with all the proper pronunciation keys and all the proper vowel points that weren't even included in any ancient Bible. All of a sudden, it's like voila. Here's the Hebrew Bible just perfected all of a sudden. It's like Mork from Mork and Mindy. Dude born a grown man. That's what they did. Some Benjamin Buttons type of stuff. Here's the Hebrew Bible in the 900s. All of a sudden, wasn't no gradual improvement of that biblical text. It wasn't no gradual improvement of, hey, here's the Bible. We're going to improve it now. Okay, here's the one with the vowel points now. Oh, here's the cantillation marks now. So 900 years after the destruction of the temple, now y'all say y'all want to present a perfect Hebrew Bible all of a sudden from out of the clear blue sky? When the New Testament was finished and presented less than 50 years after the destruction of the temple, these books were circulating around. Not Nicaea. Don't believe the hype. Nicaea did not take books out and put books in. Read academic scholarship history. Not no history that's biased from people that don't believe the Bible or that hate books of the New Bible. No, learn how to study academically and look at the records from that time. That's what I did. I said, well, you know what? Let me see what Justin or Justinian the Martyr, let me see what he wrote. Let me see the records of what Trypho wrote. Let me look at Ben Uziel's Targum. All right, Jonathan ben Uziel or Jonathan ben Uziel. Let me look at the Targum Onkelos. Let me look, these things are available right now, and they're from the 2nd century. So look at the contemporaneous records. Don't go off of what I'm saying, because I wasn't even there. Look at the records that have been passed down for centuries, and look at the ones from the 2nd century. And guess what? You can ask Google. You can write a university. You can get records and proofs and sources from ChatGPT. You don't got to take my word for it. You don't got to take my word for nothing. You can do your own research, and you can see what it says and what it doesn't say. So like I said, anybody that don't believe in Hamashiach, we can argue now from what we know now about what people wrote later. But isn't that kind of coincidental that the first major opposition wasn't until 900 years later? After that full-grown baby Bible, that full-grown man Bible, ain't that a coincidence? And it was the time of the Messiah, the time that Mashiach was walking the earth, everybody was silent. Nobody had nothing to say then, right? Everybody was just like, twiddling their thumbs. Right? Why? I'm going to tell you why. Because they had the master plan. They had the master plan. And the master plan was started by let's say, Eleazar, so-called Rabbi Eleazar, and by the other rabbi that they call Yehoshua. And they were Tanaim, and they are the ones that tried to get with Yosef ben Halafta, that wrote that book to change the timeline, the Sefer Olam Rabbah. And they also, working with Akiva, recruited Onkelos, who was a convert into writing the Targum. Now, Onkelos used to believe in Hamashiach, but he was on some old crazy type of stuff. He wanted to do horoscopes. This is in the history. He wanted to do horoscopes, and he wanted to do mainly horoscopes and believing in all types of astrology, not astronomy, but astrology. There's a difference. He wanted to do all of that. And the believers said, nah, bro, we can't rock with you. So he was a Greek, and he believed, and he knew the Greek perfectly, but he also studied the Hebrew. And then he said, you know what? I'm going to go over here with the real deal. I'm going to go rock with the Jews. And the Jews like, yo, you understand Greek? Okay, bet. We need you to put together this Targum. You know, Greek, Aramaic, and the Hebrew. Oh, you a Satan sin. I mean, you a God sin. We need you to write this stuff down. And then he started to change the text of the Bible and put it into the Greek to try to offset the real Greek Bible. And that didn't work out. So they said, you know what, let's fall back off of that. And then they took the writings of Yosef ben Halafta, and when he changed Genesis 5 and 11 chronology to make the Bible seem like it was younger than it really was. And then that became the foundation to change all the scriptures in the Bible. That's why when you read the New Testament, you see prophecies in the New Testament that you don't see in your Old Testament Bible. Because your Old Testament, New Testament Bible, the oldest sections of what you call now the Old Testament in most Bibles come from the Leningrad Codex from 1000, as opposed to the oldest part of the Greek Bibles, the full versions that we have now, not the origins of them, but the full versions were presented in the 300s. So even there, you got a Bible, 300 full Bible, and then you got a Hebrew Bible, all right, in the 300s, you got a Hebrew Bible being presented 600 years later. Okay? So that's it. Most High bless you all right? Something to think about.